The hidden truth: the night was calm, but inside the hall there was a strange silence that felt heavy. Hundreds of people had gathered, waiting for the moment when Sundar Pichai would walk onto the stage. The event was meant to be about technology, progress, and leadership. But no one expected what would really unfold. Even Tulsi Gabbard, who was seated in the front row, could sense that something unusual was about to happen. As the lights dimmed, Sundar walked slowly to the center. His steps were steady, but his face carried a deep calmness mixed with something heavy. People expected to hear about new projects, future ideas, and digital revolutions. Instead, Sundar looked at the crowd and spoke in a voice softer than usual, but filled with emotion. "Tonight," he said, pausing as the hall went silent, "I am not here to talk only about technology. I want to tell you the truth about struggles. My struggles. The moments that shaped me. The nights when I thought I would break." His words hit the audience instantly. Many leaned forward, curious. Tulsi crossed her hands on her lap, her eyes locked on him, unsure where this was going. Sundar continued, "People see the success, the position, the name. But behind every title, there is a story of falling, failing, and learning to rise again. I want to share that story because without knowing the pain, you cannot understand the strength." The first 5 minutes had already pulled everyone into his world. He began to describe his childhood in India. "We lived in a small house. No fridge, no phone, not even a proper television. My father worked very hard, yet still struggled to pay bills. I remember the day I held a telephone for the first time. It felt like touching the future. I wanted to learn how the voice traveled, how wires carried words. But I also remember the hunger in my stomach, the sound of my mother whispering that food would come tomorrow. Life was never easy." People in the crowd started to nod. Some lowered their eyes, connecting his story with their own hidden hardships. Sundar's voice softened even more. "I wanted to study, but books were expensive. My father borrowed money to buy them. When I left for college, he gave me a small bag of food, and he said, 'Son, life will test you, but you must not forget kindness. No matter how high you rise, never forget those who still walk barefoot on the ground.' These words stayed in me, and they guide me even today." A moment of silence filled the hall. Tulsi leaned slightly forward. Her eyes were not just listening, they were feeling, but Sundar was not finished. He told them about rejection. "When I applied for opportunities, many doors closed. Some people laughed at my accent, others doubted my ability. There were nights when I sat alone, wondering if I was chasing an impossible dream. I even thought of giving up. But every time, I remembered my father's words. Kindness and resilience. I chose to rise again." His voice trembled slightly. This was not a CEO speaking. This was a human being, standing vulnerable in front of the world. Suddenly, Sundar paused, looking directly at Tulsi. "You know, people think strength is about never falling, but true strength is standing back up when the world expects you to stay down." Those words struck Tulsi like a wave. She was known for her courage and discipline, but she felt something inside her shift. She whispered to herself, "This is not just a story. This is a mirror." The audience held their breath as Sundar prepared to share something even deeper. "There was one night," he said slowly, "when I had no money for food. I had walked miles hoping someone would help me. I sat under a streetlight with an empty stomach. I thought, maybe this is where my dream ends. Then, an old man I had never met stopped by. He gave me a piece of bread. Nothing more. Just bread. But in that moment, it was not food. It was hope. A stranger's kindness carried me through. That is why I believe success is not about how much you own, but how much light you give to others when they are in the dark." The hall was so quiet that even the sound of someone breathing could be heard. Many people wiped their eyes. Tulsi pressed her lips tightly, trying to hide the emotion rising inside her. Then came the twist. Sundar looked down for a moment, then back at the crowd. The truth is, that old man who gave me bread did not even know he was saving a dream that would one day touch millions. Sometimes, the smallest act of kindness is greater than the biggest invention, because kindness builds the human spirit, and only a strong spirit can change the world. The audience erupted in soft applause, not the kind of applause for an announcement, but the kind that comes when hearts are moved. Tulsi herself clapped slowly, her face thoughtful. But Sundar raised his hand and stopped the applause. "Please," he said gently, "this is not the end of my story. What I am about to share may surprise you, and maybe even change the way you see success forever." And in that moment, the entire hall leaned forward again, waiting for what was next. The moment of silence. The hall was still heavy with the words Sundar had just spoken. People could feel his story settling in their hearts. Tulsi sat frozen, her hands resting on her lap, her eyes fixed on him. She thought she had come to hear about leadership and technology, but instead she was witnessing something far greater, raw truth. Sundar took a slow breath. His voice was calm, yet full of weight. "I want to tell you about a time when I was tested in ways I never imagined. Not by books, not by exams, not by interviews, but by life itself." He paused, and the silence felt like it stretched for minutes. The audience leaned closer, almost afraid to miss a single word. Tulsi's heartbeat quickened. "After college," Sundar continued, "I got an opportunity to go abroad. It was a dream come true, but dreams have a way of demanding sacrifices. My parents sold their little savings, borrowed money, and even gave up things they needed so that I could travel and study. I remember my mother taking off her bangles, ones she had worn for years, and handing them to a gold buyer. She smiled at me and said, 'Don't worry, son, we will be fine. You just focus on your studies.' But I could see the tears in her eyes when she thought I was not looking. A soft murmur rose in the audience. People could feel the weight of that sacrifice. Tulsi pressed her lips together, remembering her own mother's quiet strength. Sundar lowered his voice. "When I landed in a new country, I was alone. I had no family, no familiar language, no comfort. I remember my first night. I sat in a small, cold room. I had one blanket and one packet of noodles. I missed home. I missed the warmth of my family. I asked myself, was it worth it to leave everything behind? But then I remembered my mother's bangles, and I told myself, if they believe in me, I must not fail." His words dug deep into the audience. Many had lived their own versions of that night, far away from home, fighting loneliness with hope. He continued with a faint smile. "I struggled with money. I worked small jobs while studying. Sometimes I could not afford proper meals. I wore the same clothes again and again. I stood in lines for hours to save a little discount on groceries. But every struggle became my teacher. Every rejection became my lesson. I learned that pain is not an enemy. It is a guide." The hall was utterly silent. Tulsi leaned forward, her fingers interlocked, as if holding on to the story itself. Sundar looked around slowly. "But one night was different. It was the night when I almost broke." He paused again. His eyes lowered, his voice softened. "I had failed in something important. I had given my best, but it was not enough. I returned to my room, sat on the floor, and stared at my empty wallet. I thought, maybe the world is right. Maybe I am not meant to rise. I cried quietly so no one would hear. I cried because I did not want my parents to know how badly I was struggling." The crowd felt his pain. Some people in the audience wiped their eyes. Tulsi bit her lip, her own heart tightening. Sundar continued, I sat there for hours, wondering if I should give up. Then I remembered my father's words. He once told me, "Son, when life pushes you down, rise like the morning sun. No darkness can stop it from shining again." That night, I chose not to quit. I told myself, I will rise, no matter how many times I fall. Applause started slowly from the back rows, but Sundar raised his hand again, stopping it. He was not finished. "There is something else I need to share," he said, his voice firm. "People think that when you succeed, all pain disappears, but that is not true. Even today, when I walk into big meetings or sit with powerful leaders, I remember that night of tears on the floor. I remember the hunger, the loneliness, the fear, and it keeps me humble. It reminds me that I am no different from the person who is still fighting, still struggling to be seen." The audience felt the honesty in his words. Tulsi closed her eyes for a moment, overwhelmed by the simple truth. Greatness is not about never falling, but about rising again and again with humility. Sundar then shared something unexpected. "When I first joined Google, I was not sure I belonged there. People were brilliant, confident, and fast. I felt small, out of place. I thought, maybe they will find out I am not as good as they think. But instead of hiding, I decided to learn. I stayed late. I asked questions. I listened, more than I spoke. Slowly, I found my ground. And that is when I realized, sometimes you do not need to be the loudest voice in the room. You only need to be the most consistent." The words hit Tulsi hard. She had faced similar moments, standing in rooms filled with power and doubt. Yet, she too had chosen to stay steady. Sundar looked down at the stage floor, then back at the audience. "The truth is, my story is not about technology. It is about faith, resilience, and kindness. Every struggle I faced was a gift that shaped me. Every sacrifice my parents made was a seed that grew into the life I live today. And every small act of kindness I received became a reminder that no one succeeds alone." A deep silence fell again. Tulsi felt her throat tighten. She realized that Sundar's story was not just his own. It was a reflection of countless untold stories. The quiet struggles, the silent sacrifices, the moments when people rose even when no one was watching. As Sundar prepared to move into the next part of his story, he glanced at Tulsi again. Their eyes met for a brief second. She could feel something stir inside her, as if his words were reaching a part of her soul she had kept hidden. And in that brief silence, Tulsi whispered to herself, "This truth is bigger than success. This truth is life." The weight of sacrifices. The hall had grown quieter than before. Sundar's words carried not just sound, but a force that pressed into every heart. Tulsi sat almost motionless, her mind running through her own memories, her own battles. Yet she knew the night was only just beginning. Sundar's face, calm but heavy, showed there was still more to be revealed. He took a long breath and spoke again. "When people look at me today, they see a leader, they see comfort, they see success. But I must tell you, those things are not free. They come with a price, and the price is often paid by the people who love you the most." He paused, letting the words sink in. Tulsi leaned forward, her brows drawn tight. "When I was studying abroad," Sundar said, his voice softer now, "I would sometimes call home and hear the tremble in my mother's voice. She would ask me, 'Are you eating well, son? Are you sleeping enough?' I would always say yes, with a smile in my tone, but inside I was hiding the truth. I did not want her to know that there were nights I ate very little, that there were days I went to classes hungry. I wanted her to believe that her sacrifices had given me comfort. I did not want her to feel pain." A lump formed in many throats, in the audience. Tulsi closed her eyes for a moment, remembering times when she had also hidden pain from her loved ones, just to protect them. Sundar's voice trembled slightly. My father worked extra hours, sometimes skipping meals himself, just to send me money for books. I could feel the weight of those sacrifices even from miles away, and that weight became my responsibility. It was not just about me anymore. It was about them, about proving that their suffering had meaning. The hall was silent, except for the sound of someone quietly sniffing back tears. Then Sundar raised, his head, his eyes glowing with both sorrow and strength. Many people think success is built only on talent and hard work. But the truth is, it is also built on the silent sacrifices of those who stand behind you. Without them, you are not complete. The words hit Tulsi like a stone in water, sending ripples through her heart. She thought of the countless soldiers and families she had met, who had given everything in silence, their sacrifices unnoticed by the world. Sundar then shared a story no one expected. Once, during my early days at Google, I had a chance to attend an important meeting. It was my moment to prove myself. But just before the meeting, I received news from home. My mother had fallen ill. I froze. I was thousands of miles away, unable to hold her hand, unable to be there. I sat at my desk with tears in my eyes, wondering if my pursuit of success had cost me the moments that really mattered. The audience shifted uneasily, each person reminded of their own moments of absence, the times they had chosen duty over family. Tulsi's chest tightened. She too knew the pain of being far from loved ones when they needed her most. Sundar continued. I went to the meeting, but my mind was with her. Every word spoken in that room felt heavy. I told myself, this is the price. If I want to honor her sacrifices, I must carry this burden. I must not waste what she gave up for me. And so I stayed. I worked, and I pushed forward. But even today, when I remember that moment, my heart aches. His honesty cut through the hall. People were not just hearing a leader. They were hearing a son, a child torn between dreams and duty. Then Sundar looked directly at the audience, his gaze steady. We live in a world where people chase success without thinking about the invisible shoulders that carry them. Tonight, I want you to remember those shoulders. Parents, siblings, friends, even strangers who gave you hope. Success is never yours. Alone, it is always shared. The audience erupted in gentle applause, some clapping slowly with tears in their eyes. Tulsi joined in, but her mind was far away, thinking about her own sacrifices and the people who had carried her through storms. But just as the applause quieted, Sundar leaned forward and spoke again, this time with a tone that felt heavier. Yet even with all the sacrifices, life does not stop testing you. It keeps pushing, it keeps asking, how much more can you endure? He paused, and then revealed something no one expected. There was a moment when I almost lost everything. A moment when I thought, this is the end of my journey. It was not about work or studies or hunger. It was about losing someone I loved. The air in the hall tightened. Tulsi's hands gripped her knees unconsciously. She could feel the shift. The story was about to go deeper, into the kind of pain that leaves scars forever. Sundar's eyes grew distant as he spoke. Someone close to me, someone who had always believed in me, was taken away too soon. I cannot describe the emptiness. I asked myself, what is the point of success if the people you love are not there to see it? I thought of giving up everything. I thought of walking away from dreams, because what is a dream worth if it cannot bring them back? The hall was completely still, the kind of stillness that comes when hearts are breaking together. Tulsi's eyes blurred with tears. She whispered, he is speaking not just his truth, but the truth of all of us. And Sundar, with a faint but steady voice, added, but then I remembered that every sacrifice they made, every act of kindness they showed, was not meant to be wasted. To honor them, I had to keep moving. I had to carry their light inside me. And that is what I did. The audience erupted again, not in loud cheers, but in a wave of heartfelt claps and soft sobs. Tulsi covered her mouth, her eyes shining. She knew she had just heard one of the purest truths of life. Success is not about trophies or titles. It is about honoring the love and sacrifices that shape you. Sundar raised his hand gently. "Please, remember this," he said. "The real weight of success is not what you carry for yourself, but what you carry for those who can no longer walk beside you." The unspoken burden. The hall remained in silence, as if every person inside had left their own world behind and stepped into Sundar's journey. Tulsi sat upright, her eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. She had faced storms in her life, but the way Sundar was opening his heart in front of strangers touched something hidden within her. Sundar stood still, letting the silence breathe. Then he spoke again, his voice softer than before. "You know, there is something people never see about success. They see the title, the recognition, the comfort. But what they do not see is the burden you must carry when you rise, the burden of expectations, the fear of failing those who believe in you, and the loneliness that comes when people no longer see you as human, but only as a symbol." The words made the audience shift uneasily in their seats. Tulsi leaned forward, sensing that he was about to share something even more personal. Sundar continued, "When I became a leader at Google, people looked at me with respect, but also with doubt. Some whispered, 'Can he handle this? He is not loud, he is not aggressive, he is too humble.' They thought humility was weakness. I heard their doubts. I felt their eyes questioning me. But I told myself, I do not need to be the loudest in the room. I need to be the truest to myself." Sakin. Hall filled with a soft murmur of agreement. Tulsi's lips curved into a faint smile. She, too, had walked into rooms where people doubted her calmness, her kindness, mistaking it for weakness. Sundar then lowered his gaze, his voice dropping. "But here is what no one tells you. The higher you rise, the lonelier it becomes. You cannot always show your fears, your struggles, your mistakes. People expect you to be strong all the time. But I am human. I have nights when I lie awake, wondering if I did enough, if I failed someone who trusted me. I carry those questions like shadows that never leave." The crowd held its breath. Tulsi felt her chest tighten. She whispered to herself, "He is not just telling his story. He is telling all of ours," Sundar went on, his eyes heavy with memory. "I remember once, during an important project, things went terribly wrong. People blamed me. Headlines questioned my leadership. My phone buzzed with criticism. I sat in my office staring at the walls, thinking, maybe they are right. Maybe I am not good enough. For hours, I did not move. I felt crushed under the weight of the world's judgment. The audience could feel the pain in his words. Tulsi pressed her palms together as though in prayer, her heart aching for him. Then Sundar's tone shifted, a quiet strength entering his voice. But in that silence, I remembered something. I remembered the old man who gave me bread when I was hungry. I remembered my mother's bangles, my father's words, my family's sacrifices. I told myself I cannot let their light die because of fear. If I fall, I must fall with honesty. If I rise, I must rise with humility. But I must keep going. Soft applause spread across the hall, not out of excitement, but out of respect. Tulsi's eyes glistened as she joined the applause slowly. Sundar lifted his hand again, gently quieting the room. "There is another truth," he said. "When you succeed, some people will admire you, some will follow you, but others will envy you. I have seen smiles that hide jealousy, words that carry poison, and hands that shake yours while waiting for you to stumble. And that is another burden of success. You must face not only failure but also false friends. The crowd stirred. People knew exactly what he meant. Tulsi nodded slowly, thinking of the times she had seen the same in her own journey. Sundar's voice deepened with emotion. But I learned something important. Envy cannot break you unless you let it live inside you. The world will try to plant anger, jealousy, and pride in your heart. But if you guard your heart with kindness, nothing can destroy you. Kindness is not weakness. Kindness is power. The hall erupted in strong applause this time. Tulsi clapped, her eyes shining with admiration. The line echoed inside her. Kindness is power. When the clapping faded, Sundar looked around slowly, his gaze resting once again on Tulsi for a brief moment. Then he said, "But the greatest battle is not with the world. The greatest battle is always with yourself, with your doubts, your fears, your loneliness. I want to tell you about the darkest battle I ever faced, the one no one saw, the one I carried silently." The hall froze. Every person leaned forward, hearts racing. Tulsi gripped her seat, bracing herself for what was coming. Sundar's voice dropped to a whisper. "There was a time when I thought I had lost myself completely. Success was around me. People looked up to me, but inside I felt empty. I was moving, but without joy. I was working, but without peace. I asked myself, what is the meaning of this if I cannot feel alive? And in that darkness, I realized something shocking. I had forgotten who I was before the titles, before the recognition. I had lost touch with the boy who once held a telephone. With wonder, the boy who dreamed not of power but of possibility. The hall was silent, but the silence was alive with emotion. Tulsi's eyes filled with tears. She could no longer hold back. She whispered, "This is the battle we all fight." Sundar stood tall, his voice steady now. "That night, I made a decision. I would no longer chase only achievements. I would live with purpose. I would measure my life not by the position I hold, but by the lives I touch. Because in the end, when the lights fade and the applause ends, what remains is not what you built for yourself, but what you built for others." The hall erupted in powerful applause, some people standing, clapping with tears running down their cheeks. Tulsi rose slowly to her feet, joining them, her face lit with respect. But Sundar lifted his hand once more, calming the storm of applause. "This is not the end of my story," he said quietly. "What came next tested me more than anything before, and it taught me the most important lesson of my life." The storm within the hall had grown so quiet that even the sound of a chair creaking echoed through the room. Every face was turned toward Sundar, every ear hanging on his words. Tulsi leaned forward, her hands gently folded, as if holding the weight of the story herself. She knew what was coming would not be easy to hear. Sundar's eyes softened as he looked at the crowd. Life has a way of testing you when you least expect it. It is not always the failures in work that hurt the most. It is the storms inside you, the doubts you carry, the fears you try to hide. My biggest struggle was not with others. It was with myself. The words hit heavy. People shifted in their seats, already feeling the truth in them. Tulsi's heart began to race, her breath uneven. "When I reached a point in life where the world said I had made it," Sundar continued, "I felt something strange. Instead of joy, I felt emptiness. People congratulated me, they celebrated me, they even envied me. But inside, I felt hollow. I asked myself, what am I chasing? Why does success feel so heavy? Why do I smile in front of the world, but ache in silence when the lights go off?" The audience lowered their eyes, each person thinking of their own silent nights. Tulsi closed her eyes for a moment, her mind drifting to times when she too had smiled for others while carrying storms inside. Sundar's voice grew softer. "There was one night when I could not sleep. I walked outside, under the dark sky. The world was asleep, but my heart was loud with questions. I asked myself, what is the meaning of all this? What is the point of success if you lose yourself in the process? I realized I had been running so fast that I had forgotten why I started running at all. His words struck the audience deeply. Tulsi whispered to herself, "Yes, I know this feeling." Sundar took a deep breath. I had to face the truth. Success had not solved my struggles. It had only given me new ones. The pressure to perform, the eyes of the world, the fear of failing those who believed in me. It was crushing. I felt like I was living in a glass box, admired by many, but unable to breathe freely. The room was silent except for the faint sound of someone wiping away tears. Then Sundar said something that shook everyone. There was a moment when I thought of giving it all up, walking away from the title, the recognition, everything. I thought, maybe peace lies not in holding more, but in letting go. The audience gasped softly. Tulsi's eyes widened. She knew what it meant to stand at the edge of giving up, and how heavy that choice could feel. But Sundar's expression shifted, calm but strong. Yet in that very moment, I remembered something important. I remembered the night when a stranger gave me bread when I was hungry and hopeless. I remembered my father's words about rising like the morning sun. I remembered my mother's tears when she sold her bangles for my dream. I realized this life is not mine alone. I cannot quit because their sacrifices live inside me. I must carry them forward. The hall broke into applause, not of noise, but of respect. Tulsi's eyes glistened. She clapped slowly, her face full of admiration. Sundar raised his hand gently, quieting the room again. But I also realized something else, he said. If I was to survive the storm within, I needed to change the way I looked at success. Success is not about climbing higher, it is about becoming deeper. Not about what you earn, but about what you give. Not about applause, but about meaning. And that night, I made a promise to myself. I would not chase success. I would chase purpose. The audience nodded, their faces glowing with understanding. Tulsi whispered, "Purpose over pride." Yes, that is the truth. Sundar's voice grew firmer now. When I began to live with purpose, things started to shift. Work was no longer about proving myself. It was about helping others rise. Leadership was no longer about power. It was about service. The emptiness began to fade, and in its place came peace. I realized that true success is not measured by titles, but by the lives you touch. The hall erupted in heartfelt applause. Again. Tulsi joined them, but her heart was trembling. She knew this was no ordinary speech. This was a lesson, a mirror, a truth that would stay with her forever. But then Sundar lowered his gaze once more. "Still," he said, his voice heavy again, "life was not done with me. Just when I thought I had found balance, another storm arrived, one that tested me more than anything before." The room froze. Tulsi held her breath. She could feel it. The story was about to take another deep turn, and she wasn't sure if her heart was ready for it. The breaking point, the audience leaned forward, their eyes fixed on Sundar. The air inside the hall felt heavy, as though everyone knew he was about to open a part of his life he had never shown before. Tulsi's chest rose and fell slowly, her hands tight together as if bracing herself. Sundar looked down for a long moment, his silence louder than any words. Then he raised his eyes, his voice deep but soft. "Life tests you in ways you cannot prepare for. Sometimes it takes away what you love. Sometimes it shakes the ground you stand on. For me, the hardest test came when I thought I had finally found balance. But balance is fragile. One storm, and it can all fall apart. The hall grew still. Tulsi's breath caught in her throat. Sundar continued. There was a period when everything seemed to be falling at once. Work pressure was crushing people, were doubting my decisions, and my body was tired in ways I had never felt before. I was working day and night, meeting expectations, carrying the weight of millions of eyes. But inside, I was breaking. I would smile in the day, but at night, I would sit alone, feeling a darkness I could not escape. The words sank into the crowd like stones into water. People shifted uneasily, their faces reflecting recognition. Tulsi blinked back tears, remembering nights when she too had carried storms no one else could see. Sundar's voice grew faint. I reached a point where I could not feel joy anymore. Food lost its taste. Days lost their color. I moved like a shadow through my own life. I asked myself, how long can I carry this weight? How long before I fall and never rise again? The audience froze. Some covered their mouths. Tulsi pressed her fingers hard against her knees, as if grounding herself. Then, Sundar paused, his voice trembling. There was one night when I stood in front of a mirror. I looked at myself, but I did not recognize the man I saw. He wore the clothes of success. He had the face of achievement, but his eyes were empty. I whispered to the mirror, "Who are you? Where is the boy who once dreamed with wonder?" And I realized I had lost him. The hall was silent. A few sobs echoed softly. Tulsi's eyes filled with tears that finally rolled down her cheeks. But Sundar's tone shifted. A quiet strength returned to his voice. Yet in that darkest moment, something happened. I remembered a voice. It was my mother's. Not in person, but in memory. I could hear her saying, "Son, no darkness lasts forever. Even the longest night ends with dawn." Those words broke through the silence in my heart. I sat down, closed my eyes, and for the first time in months, I prayed, not for success, not for strength, but simply for light. The audience exhaled together, as though holding the prayer with him. Tulsi bowed her head slightly, whispering inside her heart. Sundar smiled faintly. The next morning I decided to change. Not everything at once, but one step at a time. I began to walk outside again. I watched children laugh in the park. I listened to music, the kind I had forgotten. I called my father, not to talk about work, but to ask about the weather, the small things that made life real. Little by little, the weight began to lift. I realized something powerful, that healing does not come in leaps. It comes in small steps one day, one breath at a time. The audience sighed softly, some nodding, some wiping their eyes. Tulsi placed a hand over her chest, her heart swelling with both sorrow and relief. Sundar's voice grew stronger. And in those small steps, I found my truth. I realized I was not meant to live for titles or applause or perfection. I was meant to live as a son, as a father, as a human being who gives light to others. I decided that if I must lead, I will lead, with honesty, not with pride. If I must rise, I will rise with humility, and if I must fall, I will fall with grace. Applause filled the hall, powerful and long, some people standing to honor his words. Tulsi clapped slowly, her tears falling freely now, her heart deeply moved. But Sundar lifted his hand gently, quieting the sound. His eyes glistened with emotion. Yet the story does not end here, because even after finding this truth, life gave me one more test. A test not of strength, but of love. And that test left me changed forever. The hall fell back into silence, the tension rising once again. Tulsi wiped her face quickly, her body trembling with the weight of anticipation. The light that remains, the hall was silent. almost trembling under the weight of Sundar's words. The audience had followed him through hunger, rejection, sacrifice, loneliness, and storms within his own heart. But now, as he stood still, they knew he was about to reveal the final truth. Tulsi's hands tightened together, her chest rising as she braced for what was to come. Sundar's voice lowered, steady but heavy. The greatest test in life is not how much pain you can carry, but how much love you can hold, even when life tries to take it away. He paused, and the room grew colder with anticipation. There was someone very close to me, he continued. Someone who stood by me in silence. Someone who gave me strength when I had none. They never asked for anything in return. They only wanted to see me rise. But life can be cruel. One day, without warning, I lost them. No chance to say goodbye. No chance to say thank you. One moment they were there, and the next moment, they were gone. A ripple of sadness moved through the audience. Tulsi pressed a hand to her mouth, her eyes wide with pain. Sundar closed his eyes briefly, then opened them with tears shining. I cannot describe what it felt like. Success meant nothing. Titles meant nothing. I stood in rooms full of applause, but inside, all I could hear was silence. I thought, what is the point of any of this, if the people you love are not here? To see it? His voice broke slightly, but he continued. For weeks, I moved like a ghost. I worked, I spoke, I smiled. But inside, I was broken. I kept asking myself, why? Why take them away when they gave me so much strength? And then one night, I dreamed of them. In the dream, they looked at me and said, why do you cry when my love still lives inside you? Do not waste my gift. Carry it forward. I woke up in tears, but for the first time I felt peace. I realized love does not disappear. It changes form, but it remains. It becomes the light you carry within. The hall was utterly still. Many in the audience wiped their faces. Tulsi lowered her head, tears streaming freely now. Sundar's voice grew steady again. That was the moment I understood the true meaning of resilience. Resilience is not about standing tall when life is easy. It is about standing tall when life takes everything from you. It is about carrying love and kindness even when the world feels empty. And that is why I stand here today, not as a symbol of success, but as proof that even in pain, light can live. The audience rose to their feet, clapping, crying, cheering. It was not the applause of excitement, but the applause of hearts touched forever. Tulsi stood slowly, her hands coming together in respect. She felt something shift inside her, as though Sundar's truth had reached into her soul and left a flame there. Sundar lifted his hand gently, quieting the hall for the last time. Remember this, he said, his voice calm but firm. Success will fade. Titles will fade. Even life itself will fade. But kindness will not. Resilience will not. The love you give will remain long after you are gone. That is the truth of struggles. They shape you, they test you, but they also teach you the only thing that matters. To live with humility, to rise with courage, and to love with all your heart. The hall erupted once more, louder than ever, the sound echoing like thunder mixed with tears. Tulsi wiped her eyes, her face glowing with respect. She whispered to herself, this is not just his story. This is a lesson for all of us. As Sundar stepped back, the lights above him shone brighter, as though reflecting the truth he had poured into the world. And in that moment, Tulsi knew she would never forget what she had heard that night.